All right, without a lot of fanfare, welcome to the show. The usual. Would it be one of these type of shows, Professor, if we didn't have some Mike Lubie sabotage involved? Is it subconscious with him because he just doesn't want anybody to be able to function without his presence?
I
What do you
think in this case it might be an overfix because he like created this whole new profile. I think he doesn't like me putting fake Lubie underneath there on the labels. So I have no idea. Like, yeah.
All right, so we don't have.
This one, it's so fucking complicated. Like, yeah, I mean to curse early in the morning, but
Yeah.
it's such a foobar what he left us this time around. It's it might be worse than Bill Belichick's debut at college football.
Well, no, that started out great. I mean, it's just the opposite. That it fell apart from there. Whereas we're starting out on a little bit of a weak note here, but it's always good to be with you guys. It's a Degenerate Friday. This was set up, and it's funny because I tapped in about I guess 7:30 or something just to see if the system was going to be a go, and you were already on there. And
Yeah, I was early and prepared.
you were supposed to be the guy in control here. You have all of the bells and whistles, so to speak.
Correct.
Commercials, the opening, the music, the big board. I guess we weren't going to do today because of the complications of just trying to run a show. But enough about our technical problems. We're here, and we do have a lot of football to discuss. Game last night, of course, opened up the NFL season. This was a weird one for bettors. I was doing a show here on Bleacher Brothers called Break the Bank with a couple of handicappers. We had some technical issues there, and we lost our guy from Seattle, Troy West, early in the program. And so it was Mike Jones, the great Mike Jones, me, and a guy named Frank G. out of New Jersey, who's friends with A.J. Johnson, who runs the Bleacher Brothers Network and is the founder, CEO, and the big kahuna when it comes to everything on Bleacher Brothers. And Frank says he's always playing the unders. Always unders. That's it. His whole life, he's an under player, and he's never inclined to bet an over. But he changed his mind in this Dallas-Philadelphia game last night.
Oh no!
Go ahead and take the over on this one. I think there are going to be a lot of points scored. So we're watching the first half, and they're running up and down the field. They're scoring at will, both teams. You have an over-under of 47 and a hook, and they already have 41 points at halftime. You can't feel like a bigger cinch than you did at that point. And I believe Philadelphia opened up the second half. I was flipping back and forth a little bit because I was more involved with the tennis action, which was spectacular last night out of the U.S. Open. And I see Philadelphia's already put a field goal on the board.
A long one too. So you were feeling good about that because you already made like 3 long field goals.
There you go. You got 44 points on the board, and the entirety of the third and fourth quarter to play. And sure enough, after tuning back in, I see these guys walking off the field about midway through the third quarter. Weather delay, and they don't score another point. It shows you the treacherous nature of gambling because
Big time.
Sitting on a cinch, and it's 0.0, Mr. Budarski, the rest of the way. It was nice to see the Cowboys go down, but they did cover the point spread in that ball game. So
I mean, that's the other thing. I feel like if you were an Eagles player at the point where the Eagles recovered the fumble right before the and I don't know if you saw it, but on that play, Dak circles back to tackle that corner who had picked up the fumble and gets him with the swat at his ankles. And if he doesn't get him, he's gone because the nearest guy is an offensive lineman who's like 3 steps behind.
Right.
So really, a lot of things turn on because if you'd known they were going to come back and both teams basically just be completely shut down on offense. I mean, Philly, they ate up half the fourth quarter on a drive that went like 30 yards. Like, if you had known that, you would have been like, oh, a real kick. I think for Eagles and for over players there.
Yeah, the over players definitely got buried there in a heartbreaking, crushing loss. All right, Professor, big weekend last weekend of college football. This week is the clubbing of seals, as we like to call it. You have a lot of patsies coming in to play the heavyweights. It's a week that really kind of disgusts me. I don't know how you feel about it. A couple of games of a competitive nature.
I mean, here's the thing, and you're saying pretty much what everybody's saying. I think a lot of it has to do with just we got such a weirdly huge opening week this year.
Yeah. But
with 3 matchups of top 10 teams, 2 of which I kind of ended up being a bust in my opinion. Like if you're an Ohio State fan, I guess you enjoyed that Ohio State Texas game, but I didn't think it was. I mean, it set records for viewership, but I did not think it was a quality game to
It
watch
wasn't wildly
personally.
entertaining or anything, except for the drama of who was going to come out with the win.
And then Clemson and LSU, which if folks want to put a gun to my head for picking Clemson last week, I don't blame you. Dabo Swinney, like, just won't get off that same offensive playbook he's had for like 10 years. That every defensive and the coordinator and kind of like, hey Dabo, why don't you run two guys off on one side and then have the tight end come in with the sail route? Like, haven't seen that 3,000 times in the last 10 years. But like again, paid Garrett Riley a ton of money to come over as the OC a couple of years ago off his success at TCU, and then it was like he's handed him Dabo's playbook. It's like, you just call plays from this book.
Yeah.
So I thought that game was kind of a bust in my opinion. But down here, we got high drama at the end of the Hurricanes game. Pretty much everything you could have asked for, in a game. Notre Dame came back. CJ's car, mom was all over the television for like the entire fourth quarter as they kept flashing back to her over and over again. And then Mario Cristobal tries to blow the game at the end, can't quite pull it off. I don't know if you saw the clip, but turns out the reason they ran the ball in that last third and four is because Mario thought Notre Dame was out of timeouts when they had one left.
Yes.
And when they show the replay, you can clearly see what do you mean they have a timeout left on Mario's face? It was very interesting there. But yeah, I mean, great. And then we flashed this week. We've got some fairly interesting games on a national basis. They just don't measure up to what last week was or anything close to it. I mean, Oklahoma and Michigan is a genuinely intriguing game. I don't know that either one's necessarily a playoff team, but they're two teams that, while Michigan might flirt with it, I doubt Oklahoma will.
Yeah.
You got Kansas and Missouri, which is one of the really super underrated rivalry, not in terms of the way the two programs have been over the years, but in terms of just sheer hatred of each other. And really, on some level, that's what college football is all about, is not how much you love your team, but how much you bitterly despise your rival. And, that one goes all the way back to like the John Brown raids in the Civil War. So, bloody Kansas and whatnot. So, there's a lot of vitriol in that one, and it's an intriguing matchup. And then you got some teams, I wouldn't say necessarily having big tests, but stepping into, something more resembling their weight class at the top. Oregon takes on Oklahoma State. Now they're north of 4 touchdowns, and there's almost no doubt they're going to win the game. But how do they look against a legitimate Power 4 conference team as opposed to LIU, for example? I mean, honestly, look at the Gators fans down here, and the national voice seemed to agree with them that the Gators beating LIU is very, very impressive, whereas you and I are sitting there saying, they play football at Long Island University? Who the hell
I
knew?
had no idea they had a team.
I mean,
they're going to play some basketball because New Yorkers love for basketball, and you only need 5 guys on the court. But
but even that, it's Long Island. It's not a city school.
yeah.
I don't know, but Gators fans are amazingly excited about their victory over LIU.
Some of that enthusiasm will be dimmed because of the matchups that were supposed to be a blowout variety, and I know the spread's been pretty steady at 17 and a hook. Does South Florida, in your opinion, Professor, pose any kind of a threat, A, to the point spread, and B, you wouldn't imagine they win the game outright at the Swamp? But
I'm not going to make it one of my picks, but yes, I think they have a pretty good chance to cover the point spread. I don't know. I mean, look, they're coming off a big win over Boise State, who, if you had looked at it in the top of at the start of the year or preseason, you would have said is in the same rough level of the top 25 as where the Gators were, somewhere between 20 and 25 in that zone. And they beat the holy hell out of them. Do I think that Florida has more raw material than Boise State does? Of course, they're Florida. But do I think USF? I mean, look, it's not going to be the first time for USF. USF has, over the years, been pretty good at playing very respectable first halves, even sometimes through 3 quarters, and then sort of folding up in the fourth quarter against big-time programs. They did it to Alabama a couple times. They've done it to Miami a couple of times. I wouldn't be shocked if, late third, early fourth quarter, that was like a one-score game that, Florida eventually pulls away in. In terms of winning the game outright in Gainesville, I think that's probably going to be tough to be done.
I would imagine. And then Florida faces this gauntlet, the triumvirate of games that will not only really test them, but we'll find out if they're actually any good, if that LIU game meant anything, and if they can beat South Florida. Because what do they face? They face LSU, Miami, and then somebody else.
Texas and then Texas A&M, all
Yeah.
in. I'm not even sure they get an off week. I think it's in a 4-week period.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's certainly going to be a litmus test for Billy Napier to see if he's turned that program around. All right, the first week, I'm
Let me check that real quick. 13th, 20th, 4th. They do get an excuse me. They get an off week between Miami and Texas, but in 5 weeks they've got at LSU, at Miami, home against Texas, and then on the road against Texas A&M. So yes, they have a serious gauntlet in that stage of the year.
The surprise to me was Alabama getting crushed by Florida State. I don't know how much of a shocker that was.
I think that was the surprise to everybody in the country, and not just that, not the result even, but how bad Alabama looked, particularly on defense. And you have to go a long, long time back. You have to go either like the first year with Saban when they were really bad and they lost to Louisiana Tech, or even before that to look at an Alabama defense that looked just that hopeless and lost. The flip side, if you want to say it, is that Gus Malzahn has done this to them before. He's had a lot, not necessarily in terms of the win-loss record, although for an Auburn coach, not bad on that front, but in terms of just making their defense look stupid, he's done it to them quite a few times. And honestly, I said this to Lubie earlier in the week when we were just discussing the games. It's a really good contrast in a head coach being able to put aside his ego when you look at Dabo Swinney at Clemson, who, again, I think made Garrett Riley the highest paid offensive coordinator in the country 2 years ago, but then basically just forced him to call plays from his own playbook. And then you look at Florida State in week one, and Norvell is an offensive guy, and offensive guys hate giving up control to new coordinators. But if you watch that Florida State game, that Florida State offense was a Gus Malzahn offense to the bone. I mean, the DNA had no Norvell traces in it. That was pure Gus Malzahn, particularly with a running quarterback, which has always been his preferred route. I mean, really, that's Gus Malzahn back to the early Arkansas days when Mitch Mustaine was running the team right before they went to the Wildcat. And really, there's even some Wildcat philosophical influence in there, just using Castellanos as a runner instead of a passer.
Castellanos, I guess, hold off. Was that the surprise performance among quarterbacks, or?
I'll tell you what, the big surprise to me is after I can't remember if it's 2 or 3. I'm sorry, sometimes I get lost with these COVID kids who seem like they've been in college for 9 years. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 years that he was BC's starter. I think it was 2. Correct me on that if I'm wrong. And he was always Thomas Castellanos. Yeah. And from the first play, we've got Tessitore, who is a BC guy, calling him Tommy Castellanos throughout the whole game. So we got the name switch there where he goes from Thomas to Tommy, and he looked almost like a brand new player. I mean, there were elements of that in his BC days, but very little of a game of that style.
Interesting that you brought up Tessitore, because I noticed this in his boxing calls, where somehow I believe he's actually in the Boxing Hall of Fame. He was always, a tolerable boxing announcer. I didn't think he was the greatest or anything, but he was very good enough to not make it impossible to listen to. And then he started becoming a real screamer. And I've noticed, now, is he always a screamer as a college football announcer? Because to me, he was far more back in the day.
No.
Phil Mushnick, my man Phil Mushnick, who hates everybody and everything. But on this one, I think he made a valid point. In this Florida State Alabama game, Tessitore couldn't stop screaming at any point in time.
Well, okay, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Joe Tessitore for years was like the fourth or fifth team on ESPN, paired with a guy named Rod Gilmore, and it was a very
Good broadcast.
calm, good broadcast that happened to just run into these major upsets over and over and over again. I think Boise State was number 2 in the country one year. They lost to Nevada back when Colin Kaepernick was Nevada's quarterback. And just a series of upsets, and usually in smaller leagues, the WAC or the ACC, when the ACC was relatively minor compared to the SEC and the Big Ten, which it still is. And he gained this reputation as like this necromancer who gave every underdog a shot. And then they broke up the Tessitore Gilmore booth, and the underdogs stopped winning. And we started joking about it, that like it wasn't Tessitore, it was actually Gilmore, or is the combination of the two. I think Tessitore was just so excited to be in front of a huge upset again that the Gus Johnson came out in him, and he just started from. I mean, if you watch the game, after the first drive, you could sort of start to smell that Florida State was going to make this one interesting. I think Tessitore caught the same vibe, and he was just so excited to be part of a major upset again. He let it out.
He's been listening too much to the network executives that are telling him, "Hey, that no more understated approach to this thing. It's not like."
Well, he's also been in the WWE a couple of years, so there might be some wrestling influence involved.
He's gone over the edge there. He has become the second coming of Gus Johnson. He's been doing it in his boxing calls also, which I find very, very upsetting as you're watching a match. And the guy throws a punch that misses by a mile, and Tessitore is screaming, "Oh my God, the left hand!" And I don't care for it, but it's surprising because they took a guy who was very good, and somehow he managed to ruin himself, at least in terms of being.
I mean, we could say it, and it fits us, but you got to remember, man, there's a lot of people who love those guys. Like we may be the ones who are kind of out of the loop in terms of those. Like, me, particularly Gus Johnson.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
I can't stand Gus Johnson calling anything. But if he's going to call something, I would prefer it to be a basketball game because his frenetic ADD energy kind of goes with the sport of basketball, particularly if it's a close game. But he's the guy, full back up the middle, 2-yard game. He annoys the hell out of me, but he's beloved nationally. So, we might be the ones who are out of the loop on that front.
I don't know why.
We might be from a dated age on that point because there's the classic one. The whole world loves Stephen A. Smith. I can't stand the guy. And Ed Hammond from The Drop, but everybody loves him. I mean, at some point you gotta say, well, I'm the jerk for not liking him when the whole world does.
Maybe, okay.
Or the whole world is wrong. I say that a lot
too. I think
too,
it's okay to be the contrarian in that case. All right. So on the field, I mean, in general observations from week number 1, we did see Ohio State prevail. They're now ranked number 1. Penn State, is the Franklin factor going to come in and take them out of contention for?
I mean, you're not going to know until they play a legitimate team. This has been the Penn State pattern for like 3 or 4 years now. They look incredibly impressive against the bottom of the Big Ten and the rotation of scrubs they play out of conference. And then they get into these big matchups and they look like an entirely different football team. And they tend to get very conservative in their game plans. Supposedly, this is the year they're going to cut Drew Aller loose. I'm not sure that's a good thing because most of the games I've seen where Drew Aller has thrown the ball a lot, he's been lousy. The one exception would be the Big Ten title game against Oregon last year, where they got down big early and kept throwing to try to get back in it. He was actually good in that game, but I never felt like they were going to win. So we'll see. I mean, Penn State, it's going to be deep in the schedule before we really know what they are, because really I don't think that the depth is there in the Big Ten this year. I think once you get past the top 2 or 3, I mean, Penn State and Ohio State, of course, once you get into like the Michigans, maybe, but like the Michigan States, the Minnesotas, even Wisconsin, who, was sort of in that just beneath that top group for years and years has kind of faded. So I don't know that they're going to get pushed that hard, until they play Ohio State, really. And Oregon, I don't know if Oregon's on their schedule. I seem to think it isn't.
All
They
right,
are.
what's your feeling about playing these games with these giant spreads? You have Penn State going against FIU, for God's sake. FIU, I mean, just has been not even of also ran type of credibility for some time. You don't mind seeing them get a couple of wins against a level of competition that is commensurate with what they offer on the field, but they have no business going to Happy Valley there and taking on the Penn State Nittany Lions. What are your thoughts about playing those games, though? I always like to take the points in those games and hope that like LIU gets a field goal or some fluke fumble recovery in the end zone and put 7 on the board. So now you're getting 50 plus or whatever. Are you inclined to just completely stay out of those type of ball games, or
In
yeah?
generally, yeah. In general, uh, anything above 4 touchdowns to me gets very, very random. You're talking about a situation where like one turnover or a couple, red zone trips that turn into field goals instead of touchdowns can beat you. So in general, yeah, I stay away from them. That said, there are some spots where you have like a really big offensive team. I'm not. It's not one of my picks this week, but I will tell you, for example, I've talked to a lot of people who are big on Oregon this week, laying 28 and a hook to Oklahoma State. Again, now normally would not be anything I'm involved with. Probably won't be personally involved, but I can understand the logic because you have almost entirely rebuilt Oklahoma State team going against an Oregon who has been very good defensively, particularly early in the seasons under Lanning. And then on top of it, you factor in a more explosive offense that likes to crank out a ton of fast possessions. So there can be exceptions like that, but in general, as a general rule, anything north of 4 touchdowns, I'm not going to be
All right,
involved
you're the
with.
biggest college football follower I know and have been for some time. What's your feeling about this? The general philosophy. I mean, some people would make the case, oh well, these little schools they get the big payday and that helps them maintain the program. I think it's atrocious, and that any athletic director, if you're the athletic director at FIU and you're scheduling Penn State on the road, you should immediately be forced to put in your resignation. As
I would say those games have always been important to the finances of the sport, and now in the NIL era, they're probably more important than they have ever been because if you're FIU or teams of that level, you don't get many chances at a big payday. I mean, FIU, I haven't been to an FIU home game in like 10 years, but the couple of times I have gone, it's a friends and
yeah,
family crowd. You're not, I know Pitbull gave them a bunch of money for, name it Pitbull Stadium, but how much can that possibly be? I mean, again, college football, in my opinion, it has kind of been a negative on the sport overall, but we go back and forth. College football has become more and more economic driven pretty much over the course of my lifetime. To use a classic example down here, under the economics of the sport, the run the University of Miami won, I mean, the University of Miami did during the 1980s could never happen at a school with that level of revenue. It would have to be an Alabama or an Ohio State or a Texas or one of the schools that are, year in, year out, top 4 or 5 in revenue. And that has changed, the dynamics of the sport radically. And if you're on the smaller end, no, you have to go play these games now. And you have to do it, in bad deals. You have to do it where it's, two road games with no return. I mean, back in the day, if you were a smaller school, you could even get a return game for
yeah.
2 aways once in a while. You could get,
Get Miami to go to
you know,
FAU.
again, there were some schools, Notre Dame and Alabama were historically very bad about it. But, like a USC used to take those, small games back every once in a while. And that's never going to happen under the current economic condition. And probably shouldn't because, again, you can just make so much more money playing. I mean, look, I wasn't in Gainesville last week, but I'm sure it was a sellout for LIU and, a nice payday for a school that probably needs the money. So I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I would prefer we get back to the days where schools tested themselves at least twice out of conference, but I'm not naive enough to think that's a realistic possibility. I think the best you can hope for is, and give credit where it's due, like LSU, for example, under 3 different coaches, Miles, Orgeron and now Kelly have pretty consistently opened their season with a big opponents, and you have to give credit for the schools that have done that rather than playing three MAC schools in a one double A and then come back with their hands up saying, "Well, we played Division One schools. We didn't schedule a bunch of one double A's." Okay, but how often are you going to lose to Akron?
Conceptually, I can't justify it. There's no way to condone it. I,
Well, the sad part is with this new trend where the SEC is going to 9 conference games, the ACC is talking about it. You could very well end up in a situation where just the out of conference is a non-starter for a bunch of the bigger name schools. Like I said, I give credit to the coaches who are still credit to Sark and Ryan Day for being willing to play each other in week 1, because we don't get that many coaches willing to take those kind of chances. And I hate to say it, but as you rack up losses like Florida State and Alabama, you'll probably see it less and less moving forward.
where did that loss leave DeBoer besides scrambling and doing the old Ralph Cramden?
Trying to find like a witness protection program for his family.
How much tolerance do you think he did?
I jokingly said it, but it was only half a joke. I texted Lubie in the middle of the third quarter. I was like, DeBoer's kids are definitely getting beat up in school on Tuesday.
Which tolerance level will the Alabama faithful have for mediocre results? So
0. I mean, look, I read a lot of articles on it. The buyout, if he's fired in season, seems to be somewhere between $63 and $70 million. And the general consensus is that even Alabama cannot afford that particular one. So I think he will, barring something extraordinary, I think he'll get to finish this season. But I think he better, get it together real fast, because he's on his way out the door at the end of the year.
What do you see there, though? I mean, look, we know that Nick was almost infallible there, and everybody would capitulate to his campaigning, especially in that season where Florida State was undefeated and Nick found his way into the Final Four of the college football playoff. How much, I mean, what's this guy doing, in your opinion, that is so far away from what Saban was able to accomplish there? Or did he just catch that team
I don't think he's doing it
at a time where they were due to fall off a little bit?
I think number one, I think he came into a situation where they were due to fall off a little bit. And I think it's exactly into the reason Saban left, which is in the transfer portal age, in the NIL age. You can no longer do what Saban did for 15 consecutive years at Alabama, where you go out, you stack these top 3 recruiting classes year in, year out, and then you do a system where as freshmen they either redshirt or they play special teams. As sophomores, their depth chart. Then the guy ahead of them leaves early, and as juniors they start, and they're there for 1 or 2 years as a starter. You can't do that anymore. If a kid doesn't play by the end of his sophomore year, he ain't coming back for his junior. And I think Saban recognized this, and that's the reason he I mean, look, this applies in a bunch where Georgia looked off last year. Part of it was because the year before they got hammered in the transfer portal. Alabama's been hammered in the transfer portal like 3 or 4 years in a row. So this system that Saban sort of originated and that Kirby Smart did very well, building a copy of at Georgia, it's not going to work in this era because just there's too much money floating around and too many opportunities. And it's not like, before the portal became a big thing where, like, if you were the wide receiver but was stocked behind, 5 first-round draft picks and just wanted to get out of there, well, you had to go to, like, a MAC school. You had to go, play for UTEP or something. That's not the way it is anymore. There's all sorts of schools in the Power 4 who are trying to restock year after year and are willing to go deep into the transfer portal to do it. Now, I would argue, again, let's go back to Belichick and UNC, who to me is kind of copying the model Deion Sanders built out of Colorado, where he's just wide open to transfers. He basically ran a bunch of kids out of town, had a bunch of scholarships. But he was taking guys who were deep depth material at big name schools. He was taking, the kid who was 6th in the linebacker depth chart at Georgia, and all these other type schools. And Belichick, in terms of his first roster, very much did the same thing. And what I would argue is that in the transfer portal, that's not working. FSU did it last year. I mean, they took a bunch of kids who weren't cracking the depth chart at a bunch of top programs and, were big high school recruits, but it didn't work. And I would argue it really hasn't worked that well at Colorado. And I don't think it's going to work at UNC. The kids who are working are these kids who, are largely recruited, go kick ass in the MAC for a couple of years, and then show up for their junior year at a big name school, and they could still play. So we shall see, moving forward, how much that model holds. But still, if you're in Alabama, if you're at Georgia, if you're at Texas, if you're in Ohio State, excuse me, teams want to come after your depth material every year in the transfer portal. And, that's difficult. And, you throw in, the Saban thing where a bunch of kids left just because they were super loyal to Saban. DeBoer he didn't inherit Saban's teams. He inherited the Alabama name brand, and he hasn't done the job recruiting last year that Saban had historically done. But he didn't recruit he wasn't Dennis Erickson, who came down here. And again, I think Dennis Erickson was a very good coach. But you look particularly defensively, because Erickson was known as an offensive guru. Well, he inherited, 3 years of Jimmy Johnson recruited players, and he had great defenses for 3 years. So kind of makes sense, but the board didn't get that deal at Alabama.
I remember a lot of turmoil when Dennis first took over, because he did switch up the offense to this one.
Yes, everybody hated the three wide receiver offense. I remember those days where he would do Kane's hotlines and get death threats about the three wide receivers.
I sat with him many times during those shows. He had to explain why Jamie German wasn't able to live up to expectations and the hype that surrounded him coming out of Florida. I mean, coming in as a Mr. Florida recruit. And then it took a while for his system to catch on, but once it did, he was very effective, and always was. He was like a tortured genius, Dennis. Very effective offensive coach, but just seemed to agonize over everything. Speaking of agony, I mean, you had to be reveling in this. I know you touched on it, but very professionally so, the way that you approached. I mean, how much did you revel in the disgusting loss that was laid on Bill Belichick?
Quite a bit. I loved, a lot of things here. Number one, again, very much like Dion did at Colorado, he decided that all you needed was the Bill Belichick infrastructure to win football games at the college level. Number one, I've gone back and forth. I remember one of our really early shows with the great Leslie Visser back when USC was just absolutely dominating college football. And she was like, well, Pete Carroll's an idiot. He's a terrible coach. Like, how the hell is he winning football games? And I was like, it's a different sport. It's an entirely different world. And you got to have the horses because the talent levels aren't anywhere close to equal. So as a guy who's more of a college football fan, I enjoy that the legend just can't show up and, bless his teams with magic Belichick powers and go out and win a football game. So, as a guy who's a big college fan, I enjoyed that aspect of it. I loved that the girlfriend came down in the middle of the third quarter when it was 41-7. Like, I think, like the rest of the country, my mind was a little blown by that because, like, who the hell has ever seen that from a coach's wife or girlfriend before? That was
Beverly
bizarre.
But he was usually winning, Howard.
I enjoyed the balloons at the press conference. I thought that was spectacular. You look at it, they clearly weren't expecting that. They did not plan on that result. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And, it opens up some questions because, here's the thing. In the NFL, even if you're bad, generally speaking, with rare exception, the talent level is going to be close enough that you'll lose, but you're not going to do that. You're not going to get humiliated game. Maybe once every 3 years you'll get one like that. But, you don't take it week after week on the chin. College football, that could happen 5 or 6 times a year if the schedule's, brings the right teams to town. And you got to wonder, at his age and his, level of achievement, how long Bill Belichick's going to be willing to put up with that. How many take it in the teeth games Is he going to stand?
Was it you that was theorizing? And I've heard this other places, but I want to say it was you that was saying that much of the reason that he took this job was to set his sons up. Uh,
Certainly
yeah,
seemed like it.
and that he may not be as all in as he once was when he was making his way up the ranks there as a professional coach. But yeah, I enjoyed that humiliation as much as you did, only because I vicariously was experiencing it through you, Professor. As I thought Belichick would be okay. Interestingly, though, I mean,
I think a lot of people did, particularly a lot of Patriots fans, or or people who are not college football people or NFL people, who thought like Belichick has some secret knowledge, gleaned from all these years in the NFL that other coaches don't know. Well, get number one, like with coaches clinics and visits to different. It's not like Belichick or any NFL coach knows some secret play or some secret defensive formation that everybody else in the country, every defensive coordinator in the country hasn't been introduced to at this point. So it's all about in college football having the horses. And again, unlike the NFL, look, in the NFL you cannot have the horse. We saw it last night. Like on paper, Philly is miles better of talent than Dallas in NFL terms. But on an NFL field, that can still be a one-score game very easily. Whereas in college, again, the differences in talent can be a 5 or 6 score game, and Bill Belichick just doesn't have the talent right at the moment.
I was on to watch it, and equally odd. Speaking of odds, I saw the Charlotte game originally posted as a 21-point spread, and after witnessing, we were talking about this last week. You got to see one sometimes. After seeing one, that line. I mean, when do you ever see this? Unless some quarterback that was a stud is injured and knocked out for the season. 10-point differential. I think it's down to 12 and a hook with UNC.
Yeah, again,
Would you have any inclination to put money on North Carolina in that game? No.
No. If anything, I'd take a shot at Charlotte, probably on the money line.
Wow.
Charlotte's not quite as big a group of stiffs as you might expect. I think they'll have some chance to actually win that game, although it's tough to project. Again, because they went to Max Johnson in the second half, and he's a more veteran quarterback, less explosive. He's never been like a big vertical guy, but he doesn't turn the ball over very much, those kind of things. So in that sense, Carolina might grind one out. But Charlotte's not as bad as people think, and I think people are now seeing just what the talent level is at North Carolina, whereas a week ago there was assumption that, again, Belichick was going to come in and wave some sort of magic NFL wand, and, guys who were not even considered draft picks were now second day or maybe even a first day draft pick. And again, that's just not going to happen. There's no magic formula.
All right, enough about last week. Let's get into some selections for this week. The professor with us here on a Degenerate Friday, and what do you have for us?
We got, I think, a 4-pack this week. There's some other games we can talk about briefly. But just going into what we like, we can start at noon tomorrow, which is Illinois laying 2.5 to Duke. This number looks like it's getting ready to transfer up to 3. It has been, but I like Illinois minus the points, whether it's 2.5 or 3. The Illini, I think one of the more underrated teams in terms of people talking about them coming in this year, had a very solid year, including a nice bowl win last year. Returned a bunch of players. I think they returned 14, something along those lines, including the quarterback Luke Altmaier, who looked very good in week 1. Traveling down to Duke for a noon kickoff where Manny Diaz managed to beat up on Elon in the second half, but that was actually a pretty close ball game in the first half. Now, I do like his quarterback, the transfer from Tulane. I think he brings in a nice element to the Duke offense, but I don't think it'll be enough against an Illinois team that, competed pretty well across the board in the Big Ten. They didn't look great against Penn State, I think it was, but otherwise, and Oregon. But again, those are two, hyper speed. One's a hyper speed, one's a hyper power defensive unit there. I think Illinois will be too physical for Duke along both lines of scrimmage, and I think that will translate to the road. So, laying a thin line against a Duke team, that might be a bowl team, but, I don't think anyone's really considering them even a contender in the ACC, Whereas, if you're looking for sort of an off the board team in the Big Ten, a lot of people were picking Illinois as sort of the dark horse for the Big Ten this year. And I got a lot of respect for BLM, and not everybody does. But I like his style of football, particularly for a school like Illinois, where you're not going to get a bunch of 4- and 5-star talents. I think, yes, he's conservative. Yes, that drives people crazy. And yes, that backfires sometimes in big matchups. But number one, I like his quarterback this year. And number two, I like that style when you should be physically the better team. So give me Illinois minus the 2.5. Again, if you're seeing it at 3 right in the moment, depending on where you look, it could be either. But we'll call it 2.5 because that's what I'm looking at right this
I like
second.
Bielema. Bielema was one of our head coaching guests when he was at Wisconsin on the high school show we were doing from Landlubbers, which of course included the famous quote that we play every now and then, where Lubie was able to finally get a conversation going with Bobby Bowden, his idol, and Bowden gave him the old dadgummit when he said, "Dadgummit, speak English, for God's sake." But yeah, Bielema was always. Very, very open to. I guess he realized any presence here in South Florida would help him in terms of recruiting wherever he was, and then he kind of did he fall into some form of disfavor? I mean, he sort of disappeared for a little while, and then
Well, he went
yeah,
to Arkansas and
yeah,
he was
and he
terrible.
came
there.
back now and has bounced back with Illinois. So Illinois laying 2.5 over Manny Diaz, the former head coach, who I think has done a decent job so far at Duke. Would you say that's a fair statement?
I would
Yeah.
say decent. I mean, he's not blowing the world, setting the world on fire, but you're not really going to do that at Duke. So he's done okay. Although, again, not a big fan.
All right, that's the first of 4 selections from the professor. Number 2 on the board is
3:30 in the afternoon. We're going to keep picking on the team we picked on last week. Last week we took Toledo plus 10 over Kentucky and got the win out of that one. And if you watch the game, in a game where you scored 24 points, which Kentucky did, they looked about as bad offensively as you possibly can. Their first touchdown came off of a Toledo interception. I think they drove the ball 24 yards. They did get one drive, but it was aided at the end significantly by a pass interference call on, I think it was like 3rd and 17, and Toledo took a bad pass interference. And then the other touchdown was on a 79-yard touchdown run. So, I mean, in terms of consistent offense, Kentucky had none throughout the first game of the year against Toledo. Obviously, playing Ole Miss, a big step up in talent. I kind of like this Ole Miss football team. If you watched last week, they scored a ton of points against nobody. I can't even remember Directional Arkansas or whoever the hell. Hold on, let me pull it up here while I'm looking. It was Georgia State. Excuse me, 163-7. May have found a new star quarterback in Austin Simmons, a kid from down here, played out of Pahokee, who has a really interesting story. He's only 19 years old. He graduated high school 2 years early with a 5.43 GPA. And now, starting quarterback for Ole Miss, he's already graduated from Ole Miss and is pursuing a master's degree. So, seems like a pretty bright kid to me. And if you watch last week, looked like he might be a star at rising. He did throw 2 picks last week, but it was against 3 touchdowns and 346 yards. And again, they won 63-7, so it obviously didn't hurt their efforts that badly. And I think, obviously, again, you're looking at a kid, with that kind of gray matter, probably will learn from his mistakes. They're only laying 8.5 to a Kentucky team. Again, I think they're one of the lamer offensive teams you'll see playing in a power conference. And on top of it, Ole Miss probably going to have a lot of revenge on their mind, as that was, their key loss last year, and a real mystery one, was to the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky's defense looked okay in the first half last week, but they're playing Toledo, and they did sort of, give it up in the fourth quarter. So we'll see on the defensive front. But I don't think Kentucky's offense is going to do anything. If Ole Miss hangs 14 here, they very well might cover the game, and I think they'll hang a lot more than that. Look, I could say a lot of things about Lane Kiffin, most of which would be character related, but in terms of his mind for the passing game, you can't say a whole lot bad about the guy. So I think Ole Miss will figure out how to score some points here. And again, I don't think Kentucky can compete in any sort of shootout kind of environment. So give me the Rebs minus the 8.5. Although I will note for people, this game is falling through the floor. It was 10.5 just like 2 days ago. It's not injury related. I guess people are overreacting to that win by Kentucky last year, but it is falling
All
fast.
right,
So
Illinois minus 2.5 over Duke. Ole Miss laying 8.5 over Kentucky. That's two of the four. The third game on your pad is.
we're going to take the feature, and we're going to take Michigan in the 5.5 points. Short story on Oklahoma. John Mateer, who everybody seems to be fired up about the transfer from Washington State. Go watch his games against quality competition last year, and he's really good when he gets time to process, but he is not good when he's pressured. Particularly, go back and watch that Boise State game from last year. Every time he feels uncomfortable in the pocket, he makes bad decisions. Whether it's running the ball, where he actually ran a bunch last year for Washington State, but he is not secure with the football when he does like to break the pocket. Again, I don't like the kid in terms of stepping into a defensive kind of slug out. And Michigan, I thought Underwood did, kind of underwhelming in the first half, but as the game went along, I thought he got better. And when you talk about a kid with his kind of physical talent starting as a true freshman, there's going to be a learning curve. I think he'll be okay in this situation, supported by his defense and his the running game here, which looked very strong last week. And again, people are, well, they only won by 17 against New Mexico. New Mexico's not that bad. They weren't that bad a cover team last year, actually. So give me the Wolverines and the 5.5. I wouldn't be stunned if they lost the game, but if they do, I think they're going to lose real close. So if I get above 4 here, definitely
All
give
right,
me
taking
Michigan.
Michigan, getting 5.5 on the road. First big road start for the freshman Bryce Underwood, who our good friend Ed Garcia from Texas Roadhouse, huge Michigan backer, was extremely impressed with. As you said, he really was whistling the ball there in the second half, and
Oh, no, he's got a
yeah,
monster arm.
so lived up to expectations, maybe more so than we saw from Arch Manning. Who do you think Manning bounces back? I mean, he was universally trashed. A lot of memes and things and negative things being said. What's your feeling about Manning? Will he be able to put it together the rest of the way?
I want to say yes because he seems like a good
Seems like
kid,
a
and I like the Mannings. Um, but mechanically, there were so many things wrong with what he did on Saturday. I don't know where that changing your arm slot crap came from because, again, this is not a kid we haven't seen play. He's played 5 or 6 games over the last 2 years for Texas. Um, he needs
yeah.
a lot of
All right.
work. Like, again, by the end of the year, he might be, refined, but like, from where he was starting, Heisman favorite, #1 draft pick. But I mean, he just needs some really basic fundamentals work. I mean, again, some of those throws when he dropped down and tried to throw like 3/4 or almost side him a little bit below 3/4 were just awful. And I was surprised that Sark put as much game plan on him, given that it was, his first start against big competition in Columbus, one of the most energetic crowds you will find anywhere in America. Top 5 matchup, noon kickoff, blah, blah, blah. I was surprised Sark didn't come out with a little bit more of a friendly game plan than he did. Clearly, Sark thought he was much further along than he actually was. I wouldn't make any New York City for the Heisman ceremony plans, though, because a lot looked broken in that. I mean, a lot looked broken in that
Wow, I mean,
performance.
talk about a quick fall from grace there. As this guy was, they're going to be the Heisman winner and #1 overall pick, and then next thing you know, he's battling just to salvage some of the dignity that he clearly brings to the table as a person. An easy guy to root for. All right, we have 3 picks in the books from the professor, and the last one that you're going to be offering up for the folks out there is.
The last one, we're going contrarian again. I got to be honest, this number's down a point. Some places 1.5. I don't fully understand it, and that's Arizona State currently showing at 5.5 at Mississippi State. This game was at 6.5, 7 in some places a couple of weeks ago. Mississippi State was a bottom of the barrel team last year. Lost, I believe, to Toledo early in the season, and now people, I guess, have gotten on the bandwagon after. one, sort of nondescript win, and bagging on Arizona State. I think Arizona State is one of the more underrated teams in the country when you look where they came from last year. Yes, they don't have Cam Scattaboo, who everybody fell in love with by the end of the year last year, but they still ran the ball very effectively in week one. Have their quarterback back, have one of the better wide receivers in the country, and Tyson. I think they are a pretty loaded team out there in the Big 12. Should win the Big 12, and Mississippi State beat Southern Miss the first week by 17. Doesn't really do that too much. Yes, with the cowbells, can Starkville be a tough environment? It can, but you're talking about an Arizona State team. Won a bunch of road games in the Big 12 last year, won the Big 12 title, and then went to, was it the Cotton Bowl where they played Texas in the semifinals? It took them right down to the wire in a game that was 90% Texas crowd. It's not like they're unfamiliar with, hostile environments, having played in the playoffs last year. So give me Arizona State minus the 5.5.
All right, sounds good. There's your quartet of games from the professor here. Illinois laying 2.5 against Duke. Ole Miss laying 8.5 against what he feels is a somewhat inept Kentucky team. Taking 5.5.
Hyper inept Kentucky offense.
And taking 5.5 with Michigan in a tough spot against Oklahoma, and laying a 6.5 with Arizona State against.
No, 5.5. That game said both games are 5.5 right now.
I'm
Again, going a little bit contrarian with those last two because the lines are moving.
Move quickly. Yeah, I mean, got the point.
Moving towards the teams I like. So
okay,
I'll take it.
I know you're a big Miami Dolphin fan. They go on a road. They're slight underdogs against the Colts. Doesn't necessarily reflect the usual 3-point advantage given to the home team. I think it's 1.5 was the last line I saw in that game. Somewhat of a mystery to me how the Dolphins are going to fare this year. I'm seeing much pessimism surrounding this team.
Justifiably.
Many of the forecasters have them no better than 7-10 on the season. They were an 8-win team last year, ended up 8-9, and you would think that somehow they had this core together that they might be able to build on. Instead, it looks like it's been falling apart and unraveling. So, now, what's your thought about the Miami Dolphins' upcoming season and this game where they're playing the Colts, who are forced to go with Daniel Jones as their starter because, as you had pointed out long ago, this Anthony Richardson was not necessarily a quarterback that was going to have any success in the pros.
Okay, on the season, I get the reason for the pessimism. Probably the worst defensive backfield in the NFL. I can probably think of 3 or 4 colleges that have better defensive backs than Miami does. That said, the front four looked really good in the preseason. And you look at the raw pieces in the front four, a lot of potential there if they can stay healthy. Now, in the case of Chubb and Phillips, them staying healthy seems very unlikely. Offensively, you lost Jonnu Smith, who became a really key piece over the course of last season. You do have A-Shane back. I kind of like the running back rotation they have working now. We'll see if Ollie Gordon can sort of develop into that big back that they deploy in short yardage situations. That seems to be his anticipated role. And Hill and Waddle are obviously a very solid 1-2. Although there are a lot of people, I guess, since they stripped Tyreek Hill of his captaincy, think that Tyreek Hill is on the trading block and may not necessarily finish the year down here. It's one of those things. It's been the same situation for 3 or 4 years now. Tell me how many games Tua is going to play, and I'll tell you how many games I think the Dolphins are going to win. Because unfortunately with Tua, you can sort of factor that he's probably going to miss 3 to 5 games. It seems to be pretty much an annual rite of passage. Assuming everybody's good to go the whole game on Sunday, I actually like the Dolphins plus the point on Sunday. I don't see any reason why they can't go up and get a win against the Colts team that seems to be kind of falling right into their lap, particularly with Daniel Jones at quarterback, who is a guy, again, we've seen it a number of times over the years in Giants, does not deal with a pass rush well at all. He falls apart when he gets hit. And again, you look at the Dolphins' rotation with Phillips and Chubb and Robinson, they should be able to hit him. So I feel good about Sunday. I don't know how I feel about the season. Anywhere between 7 and 10 wins sounds about correct to me, and probably will depend, like I said, on how many games Tua starts and finishes
Been
throughout the
must have been
course
a
of the year.
largely prevailing chalk year last year in the National Football League because I'm looking at this 10-person handicapping grid that they feature every week and every year in the New York Post. And most of the handicappers last year were significantly enough above 500 to make you a winner. Not that they all always pick chalk, but in particular, I'm looking at two very startling handicapping results here. The guy that heads up the whole section is a guy named Matt Ehalt, and he made his debut with a couple of professor-like spot selections where he's not handicapping the whole
Okay.
card and he's giving you his top picks. Last year, in a year where everybody else was just annihilating the point spreads, this guy went 16, 27, and 1 with his spot plays. And
Ouch.
their other handicapper, who they feature with a couple of spot plays in the NFL, is a guy named Dylan Svoboda. And his record last year with his spot plays was 10 and 18. So I'm inclined to think, and one of his picks, let's see, that this guy Ehall likes the Bengals over the Browns, laying 5.5. Cardinals over the Saints. The Saints, you would think this Spencer Rattler. How the hell? I mean, are you going into a season with Spencer Rattler as your starter? Is there even the most remote of prayers for the New Orleans Saints this year? They're going to need some kind of voodoo magic.
Not fine remote. You mean like making the
No,
playoffs
I
kind
mean
of
just get
prayers?
them
Then no,
in,
there's no
a
prayer.
representative number of games.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you what Spencer Rattler is. He is a younger. I don't know what he's, an albino or whatever. He's very
Yeah,
strange looking. A guy like that Dennis Johnson, where he looks like maybe he's half black, half white, but he's got like
right.
red hair and albino skin. But he's the Ryan Fitzpatrick of redheaded Dennis
Yeah.
Johnson looks alike. It's like he's going to chuck the ball deep a lot. Some weeks it's going to work, and some weeks he's going to throw like 4 picks and look ridiculously bad. He's going to take a lot of chances that other NFL quarterbacks don't take. And he'll win a game or two that you totally aren't expecting him to, which is why the 2 picks I keep hearing for everybody who's in the Survivor, well, 3, because a lot of people did take Philly last night for Survivor, were Philly last night, the Cardinals on the road, and the Broncos at home. I would stay away from the Cardinals on the road one because, again, I think Rattler's one of those guys with all the chances he takes is going to pull an upset or two over the course of the season, and you factor in the home field advantage on top of that. Just coming off the Katrina anniversary last week should be a pretty raucous environment in New Orleans. The Cardinals is one I'd stay away from. I don't have that much faith in the Cardinals this weekend.
Are you
Survivor.
involved in any Survivor pools this year?
I am not. I just, I catch the chit chat
Yeah.
about it
Well, I
all
mean,
over the
my general
place.
strategy is always go against the game that seems the most obvious in the first week, even though that's in contrast to my overall approach, which is take the game that you really believe is going to win. But in week number 1, we've seen it a couple of years in a row where Cincinnati had the biggest point spread and got creamed in the first week of the season. And in the Circa Survivor pool, which
I
is the big one with millions of dollars at stake, and I don't know some ridiculous number of entrants, that one game eliminated like 40%, and then the Ravens lost the
yeah,
next week, and that eliminated another 30%. So
I know there are people who are taking them again this year. I know a lot of people who think that somehow Cincinnati's defense is going to be a lot better this year. I don't see it, and I would be very hesitant to take the Bengals. Not that I think great things about the Browns. I think the Browns are a dumpster
could
fire.
be better.
But again, Cincinnati's defense is so bad that I'm not sure anybody's
No.
ever out of it playing against the
And
Bengals.
I don't know. You're not
Um,
a big Caleb Williams fan, but and
no,
oh,
I
you do?
like
Okay,
Caleb
because
Williams.
we
Yeah,
saw him crying at the end of his career.
I mean, yeah,
A
I
little
don't
sad.
love the
Yeah,
crying and the painted
right.
nails, but yeah, he's a
Yeah,
talent.
and maybe with Ben Johnson, they said that they're going to try and find a way to raise his completion percentage and other ways to employ him. And what Eberflus wasn't exactly Vince Lombardi there with the Chicago Bears, so perhaps.
I mean, again, would I take them in Survivor this week?
Yeah,
No. Could I see the Bears, being on the fringes of the wild card? Maybe. I mean, I'm a big fan of Ben Johnson. I think he was largely responsible for the offensive
yeah.
turnaround in Detroit. And I like the Bears' talent offensively more than I've liked it in years, although the offensive line still could use a lot of improvement. So we'll see. But yeah, I could see the Bears being notably. And again, people are forgetting like the last half of last year, they were terrible. First half, last half of last year, they didn't win a lot of games, but
We're
they
in there, yeah.
competed in a bunch of
They
games.
took some
Yeah.
tough losses too, right? Weren't they? Didn't they miss a field goal to lose to the Chiefs at some point?
And I think there were one score with Detroit on Thanksgiving Day when Detroit was playing just like an
Yeah.
absolute buzzsaw. I think they ended up covering that game, and it was only like a TD game. Again, I didn't think by the end of last year they were playing that poorly. I could see them, posting a decent number, or at least not being an embarrassment this year, showing the progress you want to see under a first year coach. But again, I'm a very big fan of Ben Johnson,
All right.
so we'll see.
How do you get YouTube? I saw this Chiefs game against the Chargers is on YouTube.
I'm not even going to begin to try to explain to you downloading
Well, what
apps,
the hell do I have to
Defo.
do to watch this ball game tonight?
You have a smart TV?
That I wouldn't even be able to tell you.
Okay, well, then you're going to have to watch on your phone or your computer.
Okay, unlikely to do either of those two things. So it looks like we're
Or, just go to a bar that
gonna
has
have to
YouTube.
figure that out. I mean, what
You're not too far from Stingers. Let Dave B figure it out.
He's a little lame on that sort of thing. He knows how to find the Lions games. And that's about it. They're up on every screen. All right, Professor, we'll talk to you in a few on Barrier Bookie. They're on nofilter.net. Great job. No fanfare here. There was a no-frills show, but we got the selections. And we will be with you again on Monday. Recap of everything that went on, college football and the pros as the Dolphins make their debut in Indianapolis and have to go against our good friend Charlie Partridge and his defensive front for the Indianapolis Colts. So as much as I would like to see some kind of enthusiasm in this town, small rooting interest in seeing the Colts do well, especially with their front form in the pass rush. Because of our affiliation with Charlie over the years. Professor, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for being with us under the usual Lubie sabotage circumstances here on the show.
You have a great one, Deef.
All
I'll
right,
see you in a little
the
bit.
Professor, ladies and gentlemen. We will be with you again on Monday, and you can catch us right here at 8 o'clock. Lubie will be back from Cancun with hopefully a deep tan and a very relaxed approach to things. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Hopefully, you'll make a big score, and we'll see you next time on the next edition of the Defo Show.